Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our teacher event, Breaking into Medical Sciences. We will just get started in a couple of minutes. We'll just wait for everyone to be let in. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our teacher event. It's great to see so many teachers with us. I know and appreciate that it's a really busy time of year with the half term coming up and with lots of deadlines for the early applications and Oxford deadlines coming up this week. So we really appreciate you taking the time out to be with us. For those of you that I've not met before, my name is Una and I am one of the Partner Development Directors here at InvestIN Education. Within the partner development team, we work with over 4,000 schools in the UK and internationally to support teachers in their mission to helping students prepare for the world of work. And we've been running events for teachers since 2017, but I'm delighted to welcome you tonight to our first teacher event of this academic year, Breaking into Medical Sciences. And tonight we'll be putting a spotlight on the interview processes for medicine, veterinary medicine and dentistry. I'm really looking at how we can support your students in terms of preparing for the notoriously competitive application processes and really allowing students to fulfill their potential throughout the interviews as well. So just to look at what we've got coming up tonight, I will give a very brief introduction and welcome before handing over to Dermatology Registrar and Academic Clinical Fellow, Dr. Julian Pearce, who will be talking us through medical sciences and interviews from his background as a UCL interview panelist. We will then be putting Julian's tips and tricks into practice, where one of our InvestIN University advisors, Tanya, will be going through a mock interview simulation so that you can all get a taste of the kinds of things that interviewers look for. Before concluding with the Q&A, I will just provide a couple of updates from InvestIN and a summary. And at this point, it's just worth me saying that tomorrow we will be following up with an email containing the slides, a recording from tonight, as well as some further resources for you to share with your students as well. So tonight, I'm delighted to be joined with a number of different professionals and students across the medical sciences. We've got Dr. Julian and Tanya joining us with their backgrounds in medicine, Ellie with veterinary science, and Zara is currently completing her dental degree as well. So a huge thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. And I know that between them, hopefully we'll be able to share a range of insights as well. And in order to make sure tonight is nice and interactive and we can hear from everyone at home, we will be using our polling app Slido. So in order to access Slido, all you need to do is go onto a browser on your phone or a web browser and go to slido.com, and the hashtag tonight is medski, and you'll be able to there complete on any of our polls that we launch, as well as ask any questions throughout the night. And please do submit questions on our Q&A tab, because it will just mean that we can collate those all ready for the panel later on today as well. And you can also use the QR code on screen that will take you straight to the Slido event. So to get us started then, I'll just ask the first question, just to find out who we've got logging in today and where from, because like, obviously the beauty of doing these events online is we can get so many different teachers coming in and sharing their insights from across the world. So it'll be great to hear where everyone is logging in from today. And just show those results on screen as they come in. So lots of people joining us. I'm also logging in today from London, which is great, but we've got people internationally as well as throughout the UK and Bristol, which is fantastic. We've got some new programs we've launched in Bristol this year. So yeah, great to see such a range of teachers tuning in tonight, and hopefully regardless of where you're tuning in from, the tips and tricks we'll be sharing will be really useful in terms of giving those to your students and helping them prepare for what's coming up over the next couple of months. So I'll just stop that one there. And talking of, what's coming up for your students over the next couple of months, obviously to kind of contextualize why we're here tonight, I'm sure you're all very familiar with the timeline that your students are kind of on in terms of the applications. Obviously, over summer, they would have received various results for assessments and exams they might have sat. This week, we've got the UCAS deadline coming up. Beyond that, students will be invited to sit assessments, and obviously then some students will be invited to interviews as well. But really, you know, there's three kind of key stages for students here. So you've got the initial application, any admissions tests that they sit, and then interviews. And that really is where our focus is going to be today. So looking at the various types of interviews, all with those kind of common themes and the tips that we can give students, as well as what you as educators can be doing to support them as they prepare for this kind of crucial stage of the application process. So to get a sense of how everyone's kind of feeling as we're going into this next stage of the application process, I'd just like to, you know, throw out a poll to get a sense of how confident you are all feeling in supporting students through medical school application processes. So with this, we'll put 0 as, you know, not being confident at all, and 10 as extremely confident, and see where everyone's sitting tonight. So I'll just start sharing those as the results come through. So fantastic, actually. We've got, you know, quite a range there of responses, but, you know, the average score being 6.4. So it's great that so many of you have a sense of what you can be doing to support students as they go through this process. But hopefully, as a result of today, we'll get those numbers slightly higher, and you'll be able to learn from all of the tips and tricks from our professionals as well. So let me just stop that one there. And yeah, so, you know, we've obviously there just kind of looked very, very briefly at the entire application process. And really today, the focus is going to be on interviews themselves and what your students can do to succeed. And actually, you know, hopefully you'll find today there are some takeaways that really can be applicable across the board. So looking, you know, at job interviews even, or I'm sure you've got students who are applying for Oxford or Cambridge, and you can apply some of the things that we look at today. And we really find that if students can master the art of the interview now, it will really set them up for their future career, wherever that might take them. So we're going to do that deep dive now into the world of medicine, dentistry, and veterinary science. And I'm very excited at this point to hand over to Dr. Julian Pearce, who is here to share his expertise on the interview process. And I'll let Julian give an introduction to himself.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. And thanks, Una, for the intro. So my name is Julian Pearce, and I am a doctor working in South London. I am specialising in dermatology, and part of my the other things that I do is to work for and with InvestIN, and really try and help students who are interested in a career in medicine break into that very difficult and competitive career choice. And hopefully today I'll be able to give you some really key bits of information about how you can help support students through the process, because it is stressful, it can be difficult, and sometimes it just helps to break things down a little bit. I also, as Una said, do and have for a few years now interviewed for various different medical schools in England. And so hopefully I can just bring some top tips for you, and you know, that you can use to help support the students tonight. So let's move on to the first slide. So medical sciences is really an umbrella term for lots of different vocational degrees and ultimately careers, such as medicine, dentistry, veterinary science, and also allied healthcare professionals such as nurses, you know, pharmacists, radiographers. There's a huge, it's a huge industry with lots and lots of different variety and opportunities, and it really is expanding with lots of rapid growth, rises in automation, and you know, jobs and job roles are always changing, including our own. So it is a very exciting and diverse career choice to get into. And I think that's really what is attracting people towards it. Next slide. So I think it's important when we're thinking about the interview process and what interviewers and medical schools are looking for to break down the key aspects of a career in medical sciences. And really, this is what I've done on this slide here. And I think it's important to encourage the students to think about their career in terms of these categories, because it can help them focus on having a look at what they've done in terms of work experience, extracurricular activities, volunteering, academic work, for example, and pulling out key skills that they're already using within those contexts, to then subsequently write about in their personal statements or speak about in interview answers. And I won't go through them all, but just to pick out a few, I mean, in terms of the academic side of things, showing a passion for the academic side and interest in projects that they've been involved with or extra reading around their career choice can be really powerful in an interview, because it shows that they go that extra mile to do the research, that they're an independent learner, and also really nods to the fact that medicine, dentistry, veterinary sciences are careers of lifelong learning. You're always going to be learning. Loads of stuff has changed since I graduated. I'm always learning new things, and being, professional exams, for example, or, they don't stop when you leave school and university. So I think it's important just for them to have an awareness of the fact that it's a career of lifelong learning, and that, because that just does show some insight into the fact that they know what they're getting themselves into. But also, like I said, using a reflective lens to look at what they've done or are doing in their lives and their schoolwork and extracurricular things, to pull out those skills. So that might be teamwork, which is obviously incredibly important in these careers, working with lots of different professionals, peers, allied healthcare professionals, a huge human aspect to it, whether that's with colleagues, with patients relatives, or with pet owners in terms of veterinary sciences, and also practical things, so good hand-eye coordination in terms of procedures and examination, but also softer skills like communication skills. And as I've said, these are hugely varied careers, and so really when you're thinking about the skills that are needed, you've got to think about it in terms of variety as well, but really maybe home in on some specific ones that can show the student in the best light possible, where they're strongest at. Next slide, please. So in terms of the current climate, there is a prediction, and it's coming true, that there's a huge global investment in the healthcare industry after COVID. It really highlighted the importance of research and scientific innovation, different ways of doing things such as digital health and digital healthcare. And so this is, you're not going to be short of any jobs. But universities are being oversubscribed, and because of COVID, they saw a huge increase in terms of medicine in the amount of people who are applying, but there was a reflexive increase in the number of spaces as well, and even new universities opening up. Having said that, 70% of students in year 13 reported finding it more difficult to develop skills that might be useful in their career, and found that they're having to catch up on lost learning. And I think this is definitely true and very, very challenging. But what I've been really trying to encourage students to do is to have maybe a perception shift in the way that they looked at the experience of having to work from home, and the difficulties that COVID brought them in terms of their work experience, options, their volunteering, their skills that they couldn't or could develop in different ways. And really, actually, the pandemic did enable some of those skills to be strengthened rather than just lost. That would be things like independent learning, and taking responsibility for your own work, making an effort to stay motivated. All of these skills are applicable to these careers, and they can definitely be tapped into and spoken about in a positive light when reflecting upon what happened. So next slide, please. So in terms of the medical and dental and veterinary school application process, what are we looking for? It's not a secret. Actually, you can look at the specific skill sets that the universities want to see on their websites, and different universities will have a different focus and prioritization on various skill sets. And we'll look at an example in just a second that I've copied from the King's College website. So I think it's important that when students are prepping for interview, instead of just using general interview questions that you may pull from websites, which of course are important, looking at the specific qualities that the individual universities that they are applying to is very important as well. So looking on their website, seeing what focus they are looking for in their candidates, and then helping to shape their answers towards that. And like I said, there'll be an example in just a minute. This list is adapted from the Medical School Council and Dental School Council's website. That is, those are websites which really lay out in very plain ways what skills and qualities and attributes candidates are expected to have. And you can use this list of those websites to help practice their interview questions. Are they hitting those key things? So they're quite obvious. So, demonstrating an interest in the vocation and a dedication to the area. So that may be facilitated by extra reading or work experience or project work. In terms of justification, so this is really about reflection. It's definitely something that I harp on about a lot, but if a student is reflecting upon their experiences, whether that be their sporting activities, their music, their team working, leadership within those contexts, or whether it's in their work experience and how they've gained a realistic understanding of the career that they're wanting to apply for. Reflection is absolutely key. So we want students not just to tell us the list of their work experience, we want them to tell us about it and then reflect on it. What did they specifically enjoy about it? What did they learn about it? What was the surprising parts about it? How have they reflected on that? What did they speak about in terms of challenges with those professionals that they met in terms of their jobs, and how do they think that they will be able to cope with those challenges in the future? That depth of reflection scores highly, and that's because reflection is a part of everyday life for the professionals within these careers. You have to be able to do that to be able to be safe and to learn from the different situations that you find yourself in. So if the candidate is able to demonstrate that in interview, they'll score really, really high. Next slide, please. So what is the well-rounded candidate? As I've said, it's not just the list of activities, but it's also reflection in terms of coping mechanisms, balancing studying and work, dealing with stress, avoiding burnout, which is a hot topic, particularly with COVID, and really speaking about their work experience in this valuable way. And I think that one of the most important aspects is gaining this realistic understanding of the career. We want the candidate, when they've left the room, we want to be able to think, yeah, they know what job they're applying for, because it's not just an interview for a place at university, it's a job interview. Because everyone is, as long as they pass their exams at university, guaranteed a job at the end of it. And so I think encouraging students to think in that way is important. Next slide, please. So here is the example from King's College that I mentioned. Evidence of appropriate commitment to and realistic appreciation of the academic, physical and emotional demands of a medical degree and career. So that's the insight. Communication skills and team working. So these are the focus for King's College here. But also I like this example from King's College because it also gives you something more. It's really that last bit there, that they've demonstrated some experience of society beyond their immediate environment. So, if you're applying for an interview here, I think it's important to pay attention to that. This is on their website. It's something that they're looking for in their students. And so this may be gained by volunteering experiences, work experiences. Volunteering is really the one that springs to mind here. And just having an interaction with members of society who they maybe wouldn't naturally meet. and adapting to that, using their communication skills in a different way, perhaps, whether that's with the elderly or the very young. And so you can really help, you can really do your homework, I think is what I'm saying, before the interview for their specific universities, and be able to tailor your answers in a really helpful way. So I definitely encourage you to work with the students in that way. Okay, next slide, please. So in terms of opportunities, this is obviously has been very difficult because of COVID in terms of specific work experience, but universities are understanding, and you absolutely can gain work experience, but in slightly different innovative ways, whether that is, for example, online or in-person career experience programs, such as with InvestIN, where you're meeting professionals within that industry. You are able to ask them the questions about their job. You get hands-on experience in various things such as suturing, but also just going out there and trying to gain as much experience as possible. And that might be just a conversation with a local GP or with a local vet, and asking them these important questions so that the student can then reflect upon them and think about them in terms of, is this for me? What coping mechanisms will I be able to have to be able to deal with the challenges? What do I think I'll really enjoy the most? And then be able to speak about it within the interview. In terms of volunteering, I think this is a fantastic opportunity, as well as part-time work. We have a lot of students that I meet who do work in some capacity part-time. This shouldn't be ignored, because you can gain a huge amount of skills and be able to reflect on a huge amount of skills in this context, whether that's handling money in a shop and being trustworthy, turning up on time, making sure that you're communicating well with customers and your colleagues, working in a team properly, or maybe even a leadership role. And so the opportunities are there, and I think that it's the way that you speak about them and reflect on it and draw out those skills and reflect on them that is important. So don't be afraid to encourage them to approach contacts, even if that's through royal colleges or charities, for example. There's a huge amount out there despite the difficulties. So really the takeaway is that any experience will help generate great skills, and the more students have, the more they're able to talk about. Next slide, please. Thank you. So work experience is a must-have, and that really does go without saying, because of the key importance of having a realistic insight into the career. But also it does demonstrate commitment and passion when they reflect on their experiences, and they do that in a very enthusiastic way in the interview. It really does help light up the interview, and if the student feels passionate about what they're saying, the interviewers feel passionate as well. So it's very infectious, and so I think delivering that experience in that way can be very, very powerful. So obviously the main ways would be to discuss, to send applications to the hospitals. Each hospital for medicine has a specific person who is dedicated to replying to and organising work experience. And there are people who have those roles within veterinary practices, dental practices, and GP surgeries as well. There's more formalised work experience placements. Volunteering we've spoken about. The jobs.nhs.uk show some local work, such as getting involved in the hospital in a non-medical capacity, but you're still within the environment and able to make contacts. And I think variety is key. The more that you have, the more that you're able to reflect on the different skill sets that you may be using. But I think I will reiterate the fact that universities are understanding about how difficult it has been, and so using different and more varied ways of gaining this work experience is very, very sensible and encouraged. Okay, next slide, please. So on to interviews. So the mainstay of interviews now, specifically in medicine, are MMI, so these multiple mini interviews. And this has been a shift from the panel interview, where it is very similar to any standard interview, where there's interviewers on one side of the table, the candidate on the other side, and they have a conversation. and they ask the questions. Whereas the MMI is where the students will rotate around different stations within a room or within a building, and you meet different interviewers at different stations. And different stations will be testing different things. One may be, for example, tell us about your work experience. Another may be tell us about your extracurricular activities. Another may be a task, which I'll speak about in just a second, and so on. So really, I say to students, it doesn't matter really which one, but I think it's important to be prepared before you go to know which one you're going to be examined on. And there are advantages and disadvantages to both. MMIs, there's more variety. You're assessed by lots of more different people. If you make a mistake in one station, no one else in the next 5 stations will know. Whereas actually with a panel, maybe the interviewers do get to know you better overall because they're asking you all the questions, and maybe that can work to your advantage. Either way, you don't get a choice. So I think preparing for them is broadly similar, except for the task-based questions, which I'll discuss in just a second. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the key skills which are being tested, as I've alluded to, they are accessible on these the council websites, but also on the individual university websites. Often, universities will give you a little bit of a hint and a breakdown as to what kind of things they do and assess in interviews. So look at the websites, encourage the students to do that, gain as much information as possible beforehand. But broadly, the skills will be things like organization and prioritization, motivation and passion for medicine or surgery, dentistry or veterinary science, a key aspect of teamwork, as that's a really fundamental aspect to the job, respect and honesty, communication skills, and perhaps problem solving as well. Next slide, please. So some examples would be, tell me why you want to be a doctor. And that's always a very hard question. I think it's one of the hardest ones. And I think there's a slide in a little bit about how to approach that. Extracurricular activities, they do tend to ask about this, about the skills that they may have gained from the hobbies, but also a fantastic opportunity to demonstrate a really good work-life balance and to acknowledge the importance of that to avoid stress and burnout. Recent healthcare news, tell me about a recent healthcare topic you've read about. Another great question and comes up a lot. It shows their dedication, their interest within this career, and their motivation to go and learn new things independently. In terms of work experience, they like to ask about challenges. So describe one of the challenges that vets face. What have you heard or seen on your work experience which you think that you will find challenging, and how will you deal with that? Are common questions, as well as more positive questions like what did you enjoy the most? And tasks. So the MMIs, they do lend themselves to task-based questions. Students often find this the most daunting, I think, going into it, but actually it's an amazing opportunity to really show off your skills. An example may be you are given a graph for 5 minutes before you go in to analyze, and it shows the levels of obesity rising over the last 10 years. And you're asked to interpret that and think about it in the context of how doctors can help deal with that and our role within this, this obesity epidemic. And I think, or it might be something to do with breaking bad news, such as you were trusted to look after your friend's dog, and unfortunately the dog ran away. And you have to demonstrate your good communication skills in that context by making sure you apologize, take your time when you're delivering it, empathizing, and being proactive to try and help sort the situation out. So these are challenging. They're meant to be challenging, and they are, I think, the task-based questions. They do help sort the candidates to a degree. So I think, practicing those communication skills and, interpretation-based tasks with the students is going to be really helpful, just so they know kind of how to approach that when they go into their interview. Next slide, please. So we've been through a few of these, but, it may be a role play, such as breaking bad news, or a data interpretation questions such as the identification of trends like obesity rising over 10 years, or perhaps something to do with COVID and vaccination rates. Abstract scientific questions can be tricky. They're mainly reserved for Oxbridge students. One that I have seen come up would be, if you were going to be a bacteria, what kind of bacteria would you be? And I think the key thing to do in that situation, when it's a sort of, oh gosh, what a strange question, how am I going to approach this, is just to say, just to them, it's fine just to take a minute to think through your answer and try and think things through in a logical way, and just approach things as if you're working out a question in an exam. So talking through your thought processes. Situational judgment, what would you do in this situation? That is very popular, particularly because every medical student will have to sit a very big situational judgment test as part of their final exams. What would you do if you saw someone drinking on the ward, for example? And I think, in terms of the UCAT and BMAT questions, there are situational judgment questions there too. So the students will be familiar with learning for those already. That the key things to encourage them to do are to think, what is the safest thing to do in this? What is the most appropriate thing to do in this situation? Or what would a doctor do in this situation? And think about it in terms of that. And it often leads you down the right path. And in ethical scenarios, so sometimes they'll give you a question which has an ethical theme. For me, when I was applying to medical school, it was about the provision of IVF and how some people can pay privately for more cycles and some people can't afford that, and is that fair or not? They can be really interesting and can generate really great conversations within interviews, and people can become quite motivated and light up when they're discussing these because they're interesting. There are key medical ethics, which we run through on our courses and are available online, which provide a nice structure to answering this question as well. Okay, next slide, please. So why do you want to be a doctor or a vet or a dentist? So every student pretty much is asked this question. And so having an impactful answer is really key. I always encourage people not to learn a script because it can be quite obvious if you're just reciting word for word, but breaking it down into broad themes and bullet points that you can draw upon is sensible. Avoiding cliche and generic responses is always a good idea because so many people will be asked the same thing, and it'd be nice to hear something that's very personal to that individual, that contains a bit of reflection, always scores higher, and that can be based upon their experiences and their ability to reflect on what they've been told and what they've seen. So generating that realistic understanding of the career. So you make it unique and interesting. We want it to be memorable, and often it is memorable, and people often have very, very interesting and relevant reasons for wanting to go into these careers. Next slide, please. Tell me about your work experience. So this is a nice open question. Students can really direct the answer where they want to. And I think it's quite powerful to remind the students of that. If you're asked an open question, they have the power, and it's really up to them where they want to take it. So, I know I keep going on about the same thing, but reflection is absolutely key. And I think it's important not to just reflect on all the amazing things that they might have seen and done and how positive that was, but also acknowledge the challenges and the difficulties that they have encountered, just to tick that box for a realistic understanding of the career as well. And it really does show that they have thought about the fact that it's not going to all be fantastic, and there are going to be difficult times and difficult days with these careers. And having already thought about how they would cope with that and strategies really does show a very well-rounded candidate. Next slide, please. So some other common questions are, why this specific university? Tell me about your strengths, tell me about your weaknesses. What are the good qualities of someone in these careers? How do you deal with stress, and what pressures are they under? So you can see some really similar questions and core themes coming up here. And so the advice that I've sort of been talking about, I think, is relevant to all of these. I think students do find the weaknesses question quite challenging, and the way I encourage people to approach it is to pick a genuine weakness. The one that I used in my own interview was saying that sometimes I find it difficult to, I take on too much, and I think it's important sometimes to learn to say no, so you can do a really good job at the things on your plate and not spread yourself too thin. So that's a genuine thing that can be improved. And then to round off your answer with a positive. So how will you deal with that, and how will you change, and how are you going to improve on that weakness? So leaving them on a positive. And I think once students get in their head around that structure, I'm a big fan of structuring answers like that, because it shows that you are a structured person, and also it gives you something to hang on to in the stress of the interview. And I think they once they have that structure, they actually find that question quite manageable. Next slide, please. So the STAR approach, I'm sure some of you would have heard of this before and been familiar with it, but I think it's fantastic, and it's a great acronym to be able to use when you're faced with a question, give me an example of. So you provide the context with the situation, the action, what you did, the task, what was the task, and then the action, what you did, then the result, and then subsequently there's that reflection again. And the reflection part is absolutely key. So after you've described that example, whatever question that might be about, whether it's demonstrated, tell me a time where you demonstrated empathy, for example. You can use this STAR approach, or the students can use this STAR approach to their advantage. It gives them a nice structure to their answer, and then it enables them with that last R, that last reflection, to then think about how that relates to their future career as a vet, doctor, or dentist. And so it really goes back to providing a context for it, and shows that they've thought about why the question's being asked and why it's important for their future career. Next slide, please. So to recap, medical sciences can be used as an umbrella term to encompass careers within various fields that are becoming increasingly diverse and competitive. And the fields really do have common themes. And I think we've spoken through a lot of those themes and the skills tonight, and they really do relate to all of these different careers. And I think it's really important to encourage the students to always be thinking about what they're doing, whether that's schoolwork, whether that's extracurricular activities, whether that's volunteering or work experience, and break it down into these different themes, break it down into the different skills, and then do that reflective process so that they can demonstrate that they've got that realistic understanding of the career, that they're already a reflective professional in the making, and that they understand the value of work experience. And I think the MMI stations are becoming much more common. The task-based questions are challenging, but definitely manageable. And if approached in the right way, with a nice structure and preparation, I think they are a great opportunity for the students to be able to score really, really high. Next slide, please. So our top tips is be prepared. So I think that's been a recurring theme throughout my talk. Have a look at the university websites, have a look at the medical and dental school councils websites, have a look at those skills, the specific ones that each university may focus on. First impressions count, so make sure that on the day of the interview, the students know to turn up in the correct clothing, to avoid jargon and slang, and just to bear in mind that this isn't just an interview for a place at uni, but it is a job interview essentially as well. Enthusiasm is key. If they're enthusiastic, we're enthusiastic, and it really is infectious. And take your time, so not to rush the answer. And I mentioned that in terms of the abstract scientific questions, for example, where you won't be able to have an answer just straight like that. It's important just to take your time, think through it clearly and slowly, talk through what you're thinking at the time and you're working out. Totally appropriate and definitely the right way to do it. So don't rush through it. And be conscious of demonstrating those key skills and attributes. So if you've done your research and you're prepared, the students will know what skills we're looking for, what attributes, and they'll be able to weave those into their answers and provide the context for what they're saying. So hopefully that's been really, really helpful. Next slide, please. I think that was the last one. Yeah, you've got a bit more of an insight about the interview process, what we're looking for, the importance of structuring the answer in that way. And I hope that you have gained something to be able to help support the students in a great way. So thanks so much for listening.
Thank you so much for that, Julian. I'm sure it was received as helpfully as it was here. I think there's so many key takeaways there from looking at those specific medical school, dental school or veterinary medicine and looking at exactly what they are looking for to really be able to personalize the answers and also taking advantage of those open questions. So thank you so much for all of those insights. Hopefully now we'll be able to apply everything that you've just told us and go through some example interview questions. So we've actually chosen 3 typical questions that your students might get in an MMI or panel interview. And we will be going back to Slido for this. So if you could get out your phones or browsers and go back to slido.com and enter the hashtag Medski, or use the QR code on screen now that will take you straight there. And I should say as well, Julian will be joining us for the panel shortly. So if you have any questions based on what he said, please do put them on the Q&A tab, as well as for our other panelists as well. And we now will ask that you can put yourselves in the shoes of one of your students looking to apply for medicine, although all 3 questions that Tanya will go through could be slightly adapted for any of the disciplines that we've covered tonight. And hopefully then this will allow you to be able to kind of replicate a similar session with some of your students to help you help them prepare for their interviews. So at this stage, I'd like to welcome Tanya, who is one of our InvestIN University ambassadors, to turn on her camera and microphone to lead this simulation.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thanks, Una, for the introduction. So my name's Tanya, and I am a final year medical student at King's College London. So I'm going to be leading this simulation. So this is actually, as Una described, this is actually very similar to some of the simulations that we do on the InvestIN programs. And I've been working with InvestIN for about, I think, 2 or 3 years now, and I've done many programs. So it's really a fantastic way for students to gain an understanding of the interview process, but also to get some practice. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So when helping your students in preparing for interviews, it's useful to maybe design what we call a vignette like this. So you'll be given 3 questions, you have 5 minutes per question, and you'll receive feedback at the end of each question. So let's simulate that now. So I want you guys to put yourselves in the shoes of your prospective students. Okay, so whether they're applying for medicine, dentistry, or veterinary medicine, these questions will be focused on medicine, but as we said, these can be easily adapted to either of the other 2 medical sciences. So hopefully you guys have all hopped in onto Slido again. And we'll start with the first question. So what have you done to show your commitment to medicine? So this is being asked to a student in an interview. It could be on an MMI panel, or it could be on an MMI station, or it could be in the panel interview. So we've got a little bit of a word cloud going. So don't worry about giving detailed answers. Just shout out some ideas about what students could say for this question.
Perfect. I will just wait for a couple more to come through before releasing those so we can get lots of different answers. Okay, let me show those on screen now for you, Tanya.
Yeah, I think we've got such a big variety. So let's see. Okay, so the main thing that stands out is work experience. It's like, you know, if you, instead of just talking about your commitment to medicine or your passion for medicine, if you can show it. So showing is better than just telling, as we say. That is that is so invaluable. And the thing about work experience, or indeed any experience like volunteering, we've got quite a few people saying volunteering as well, is that it can be made really personal to you. So someone, you know, talking about their 2-week work experience, or talking about a volunteering experience they've had for a number of years or months, it really gives the interviewers a glimpse of that person, rather than just saying, you know, I'm really interested in medicine for maybe just, you know, for vague reasons. So it makes an answer really personal. Some other things we've got is like wider reading and independent research. So as Julian touched on, medicine and veterinary science, and indeed dentistry, all three of them are very academic careers. So a student that can demonstrate that they're interested in understanding medicine from a young age, from very early on in their careers, definitely looks very impressive. And then, yeah, like listening to podcasts and reading articles, again, it just shows such a huge commitment to understanding what the career is all about. And these are, I would call them quite, you know, easy things to do, and, you know, things that you don't have to pay any money for, or you don't have to go out looking for a work experience, but you can just listen to a podcast that you're interested in. I think it shows a lot of personality there. And then we've got a few other things. So setting up a MedSoc and bringing a range of speakers in, I think that's fantastic. That's definitely stuff that we get involved in as medical students quite a lot, I would say, with the different societies at university. So I think, yeah, like really, really good answers there. And such a range of things that students can say depending on, you know, like what their interests are. So we'll move on to the second question now. What difficulties will you face in being a medical student, and how will you overcome this? So as you can see in this question, there's two parts. So the first part is about just describing the difficulties of being a medical student, which is, I would say, something that universities will really, really be impressed by generally, because if you have that realistic understanding of what it's like to be a medical student, to be a doctor, then you know what you're going into. And how will you overcome this? This is, I would say, an opportunity to make it quite personal to you, and again, really put yourself in the shoes of the student who will be a medical student in a couple of months' time. And think about ways in which they can overcome some of the challenges. So again, let's open up Slido, and let's get some ideas from the teachers about how they think students can answer this question. So we've given you some a longer text to answer this question with. And actually, I forgot to mention, I just jumped to Slido, but if anyone actually wants to say their answer, or say, you know, shout out some ideas, then we have the option of raising your hand at the bottom of your screen. And we'd love to hear from you, if anyone, you know, wants to say how they would answer this question. It's okay if not, otherwise we've got like 30 responses.
Good answers come through on.
Yeah.
On
yeah. I was going to say, sorry, that was my fault. I completely forgot we were doing hands up for this. Okay, so yes, perfect. So if we could just scroll down slowly. Yeah, so like dealing with difficult situations, we can definitely expand on that. So dealing with difficult situations, whether that's as a student within medical school, or dealing with sort of difficult patients or difficult clinical situations you might find yourselves in. Exhaustion, so scheduling rest time is vital, absolutely. So that, you know, as Julian mentioned, burnout is real, not just within doctors, but actually it tends to start from medical school because of how academically rigorous the course can be. Emotional fatigue, so learn from experienced colleagues, fantastic. So we find ourselves on clinical attachments and placements consistently, I would say, throughout the 5 or 6 years that we're medical students. And speaking to colleagues about how they deal with fatigue, how they deal with some of the emotional challenges of medicine is a great way to overcome that. Breadth of knowledge required, absolutely. There's a lot of content to cover, and I can tell you that because I'm about to sit my finals soon. Time management, stress management, long hours, I think absolutely, like these are some really, really good responses. Yeah, so I think other things to mention is, so in this answer, students can get quite specific about the medical school curriculum. So for example, like if your student has an interview for a university, for a medical school that is quite problem-based learning focus. So there's different curriculums within medical schools. So there's a PBL style, there is a more traditional style, and then, for example, King's and many more medical schools are moving towards more of an integrated style. So thinking about, so a student can then, you know, bring that up and be like, you know, one of the challenges of a PBL university is that you have to be very well organized, and you have to sort of be highly independent in your learning approach. And one way that I have demonstrated already is that during my A-levels, you know, I've been doing an EPQ or like, you know, a side project that I've been doing, and this requires me to work additional hours alongside studying for my exams. And again, just making sure that, you know, I'm balancing that with my exams and preparing for those, just again demonstrates that I have the skills to be highly independent in a PBL university. So again, just, you know, taking the skills that the students have acquired during their A-levels or before that, and being able to apply it to the medical school curriculum that well, the medical school that they're doing the interview for. So hopefully that gives you some more ideas of how to approach these kind of questions. Lastly, we'll move on to the final question. So this is a more ethics / situational judgment kind of question. So a friend confides in you, so as a student, they have started taking recreational drugs on the weekends. You notice that their performance at medical school is deteriorating. How would you deal with this situation? So this is a hands up question, and I would like to hear from some of the teachers actually how they would go about answering this question, and if they have any thoughts or ideas as to how they might even structure this question, because it's, you know, there's a lot to talk about here. So let's get some hands up.
Perfect. Oh, we did have one hand up, but it's just been lowered. So I'll wait and see if anyone else raises their hand. You should just have a function on the Zoom banner. Perfect. So we've got Alistair here. So let me see if Alistair can speak. I'll just allow you to talk, Alistair, and then you should be able to unmute yourself. Hi, Alistair.
Hi, can you hear?
Hello. Yeah, we can hear you.
I think the first thing is you talk, but before long you will need to talk to somebody else, and contextually you will need to think about whether this is impacting patients. how urgent this is in terms of safety.
Absolutely. Yeah, really, really good response. I think in this situation, you have to understand that as medical students, and indeed, you know, veterinary science and dental students as well, this can be applied to, in these situations, you are held to a slightly higher sort of moral standard compared to, say, other university students or indeed other people. And the reason for that is because at the end of the day, patient safety could be on the line. So if this is a colleague of yours who is then going on to placement and is looking after patients or indeed involved in the delivery of healthcare to some patients, then is this going to impact that? And as a friend and as a fellow medical student, I think that is important to think about. So starting off with that could be really, really powerful in an interview for sure, because it goes to show that you understand what the worst case scenario is, what the risks are. Yeah, really good. Any other ideas?
If anyone else has any other suggestions for how they might respond, even if it's, you know, to counter that point, yeah, we'd love to hear it. I'll just give you another chance to raise your hand and share your thoughts with us. If not, we have got someone else. Zoe, I will just allow you to talk, Zoe, to share your thoughts with Tanya. You should be able to talk now, Zoe, if that's letting you. Oh no, I'm not sure if your microphone is working, unfortunately. So what we can do then is I can just launch it on Slido just to get some thoughts from everyone else. So let me just do that. So it's another open text poll. So you should be able to put, you know, a couple more sentences down there, and then Tanya and I could just quickly reflect on those. But it was great to hear from our teachers for that one. And Tanya, what would you say how would you advise going about that question whilst we wait for some of the teachers to put them?
I think with any of these ethical / situational judgment kind of questions, it's always important to have even a vague structure. Okay, so what we tend to use are the 4 ethical pillars of medicine. So that's autonomy, non-maleficence, beneficence, and justice. And this is just, you know, even if by the end of this talk, or after this talk, if you go away and just Google the 4 ethical principles, you know, it comes up very easily, and the definitions are very straightforward. So autonomy, you know, a person's right to make a decision for themselves. So you could tailor this question around, well, you know, one side of the argument is that your friend has every right to do whatever they want. So, you know, they've chosen to take recreational drugs. That's up to them. Who are you to stop them? But then on the other hand, you might think non-maleficence. So as a doctor, as a future doctor, it's your responsibility to do no harm, which is what non-maleficence means. And so you need to be thinking about patient safety, as we touched on before. Then you might think beneficence, so doing good for the person, not only doing good for your patients, but also the friend in question here, who might, you know, have certain circumstances, or it might be in a difficult situation. So really, you know, understanding, being a good listener, and remaining non-judgmental, because there might be genuine things that are going on that you could perhaps assist them with or help them with. And then you might also add in the 4th pillar, which is about justice, and, you know, making sure that you're being sensitive and kind, and the friend who has maybe, you know, has hopefully trusted you to tell you their problem, can then find comfort and find the right help that they need, to make sure that no patients are compromised, and that the rest of their medical school journey is not also being compromised. So that kind of brings us on to the common issues. So we don't have much time to go over the answers for the previous question, but I hope that helps to touch on, I hope that gives an understanding of how best to go about these ethical scenarios, and it all comes through practice, I would say. So common issues that students often struggle with, and we touched on all of these through the 3 simulated questions that we did, was that students often find it quite difficult to be specific and personal. And I think the best way to do that is by using personal examples in any question. With the ethical questions, a good structure are the 4 ethical pillars. And if students find it difficult to practice or be prepared, then it's very commonly seen that students will find it difficult to answer these kind of questions, whether it's the general sort of why do you want to do medicine, or the ethical question. So it's really, really worth practicing with your students and getting them into little groups and doing little mock interviews and things. So I hope that's been useful. I will now hand over to Una. Thank you everyone for listening.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Tanya, for those examples. And Tanya, again, will be joining us for our panel. So at this stage, would encourage you to go back onto Slido and submit any questions for our 4 panelists that you have. We've already got some fantastic questions on Slido. So you can use the QR code on screen now, just use your camera and that will take you straight to the Slido. You can also upvote questions there so we can get to the most popular ones for the panel in a couple of minutes. But just to lead on from what Tanya was saying there, really, we just wanted to kind of finish here with a couple of key takeaways for you as teachers to support your students to tie into everything that Julian and Tanya have said today. So firstly, obviously, we've seen how important it is that students really get to grips with the industry in the sense of actually just kind of speaking to people who work in that industry and learning from their experience and getting to know the ins and outs from trusted sources. Really, that is the best way to allow them to kind of think as a medical professional whilst they're still at school. So if you can, encouraging those conversations, perhaps even facilitating them yourselves, and encouraging students where they can to figure out, how to put themselves in their shoes and talk through the thought processes that they will have to experience and do at interviews themselves. Secondly, as I'm sure you're all aware, having a really great set of transferable skills is really going to allow students to succeed no matter the career path they take. So even if that means that a student decides, that they don't want to be a doctor, or maybe they don't want to go into dentistry anymore, it means they have a really strong skill set to fall back on. And the great news is that often students will already be doing a lot of the things that they need to do to demonstrate those teamwork or communication skills. So really encouraging students to not only be doing these things, but by actively recognizing the moments where they are learning those skills so that they can talk about them in interviews as well. And then thirdly, as Tanya mentioned, we've only really scratched the surface of the kinds of simulations that our students experience on our career experience programs, but also, there's no reason why these simulations can't be replicated in a workshop form, within the classroom, or even by encouraging students to kind of do that with each other and offer each other feedback. It's a really great learning exercise for them to actually be able to observe and potentially give each other advice as well. And then finally, whilst these careers obviously are extremely rewarding in lots of ways, it's no secret that they are challenging and competitive. And we don't want to shield students from that. And Dr. Julian mentioned a couple of other careers with overlapping skill sets. So it's worth just reminding students of the huge range of opportunities available for them within this sector as a whole. So that's kind of a couple of takeaways for you as teachers. And then to run through some things that the students can be doing. And again, we will follow up with some further resources that you can share with them tomorrow. So firstly, obviously, read around the subject area. That's come up a couple of times now tonight. And then we will provide some resources of the different kind of things that students can be doing. But really that knowledge aspect is really key. And researching the process, as Dr. Julian said, having that sense of being able to personalize what they can showcase for that specific school. I think that will really go a long way in making sure that they know it's a very tailored approach and their answers are very specific in that way. Obviously, you know, where they can, we really would encourage students to gain that specific work experience, A, so they can figure out, you know, if that industry is for them, but B, you know, that it will give them that talking point for interviews. As we've seen, they can do that reflection and really be able to talk confidently about the things they've learned. But where they can, students should also be looking to continue and develop their portfolio of any volunteering or part-time jobs, as well as any hobbies that they do in their spare time, because that's really where they'll develop that transferable skill set that we've been talking about. And by speaking to people who work in that industry, or perhaps, you know, recent students, they'll be able to start developing the way that they articulate their points and get used to the fact that they might, you know, be sitting opposite someone in a panel interview and have to talk in a similar way. So encouraging students to speak to people within that industry, or again, you know, with each other as well, is a great way to get used to speaking about themselves and their skill sets, and potentially, you know, how they would improve as well. Finally, obviously, it's really important that students are encouraged to stay positive and are able to look at this process holistically as well. There are plenty of options available for them, and if they are able to have kind of an open mind and a positive attitude, then hopefully it will allow them to really learn from the process and experience, no matter if they are successful or not. So I will just launch a kind of brief Slido question here, just to get a sense of, following on from tonight, what you as teachers plan to do in supporting students with their interviews. Just be helpful to get a sense of, you know, the kinds of things that people are looking to do. And again, at this stage, would encourage you to go to the Q&A tab on Slido and submit any questions you have for any of our 4 panelists, just so we can get to those in a second. So I'll just briefly show some of these answers on screen now. So yeah, great to see people saying things about mock interviews and a round robin. I think especially some of them, those MMI interviews as well. Different kind of ethical question workshops. I love that idea, and having kind of different alumni come in and support with that. It's really fantastic. And it's great to see someone that they feel much more confident in setting up their own sessions in-house. That's exactly what we're aiming to achieve here. So hopefully that's given you lots of ideas in terms of what you can be doing supporting students. So as I said, please do continue to submit questions on the Slido, but just to give you an insight into what's coming up from InvestIN. So if you enjoyed tonight, we are running a couple more online teacher events for teachers to encourage them to start thinking about any students that might be going into maybe careers within social media or environmentalism, and we'll follow up with more information on that. But also in November, our partner development team will be visiting Birmingham, Bristol, Manchester and Edinburgh, where we will be delivering in-school talks for students and holding some free events for parents and teachers as well. So if you are interested in those, do get in touch, and we can see if we can come and visit you in school as well. And in terms of what's coming up for InvestIN this term, we're delighted to announce that we now have such a huge range of career experience programs in 28 different industries, and they're all on screen now, including new ones based on feedback from our teachers in environmentalism, nursing, sports professionalism and more. Potentially of particular interest after tonight might be our programs in medicine, nursing, dentistry and veterinary medicine, where we offer the opportunity for students to gain that experience, start developing that network of professionals paired with that career coaching, and all of our programs take place from 1 to 15 days in length as well. But perhaps the most exciting update for us this year is that with every single student that registers from any of our programs, they will now receive a free 12-month membership to our new state-of-the-art platform, AmbitionX. So this is launching this year. It will allow students to access all of our live online programs, as well as some exclusive evening masterclasses in some more specific areas of a career. And students can tailor the platform for allow them to really build up experience points, both within that industry knowledge and transferable skills as well. And they'll be able to track their progress through the platform. And if you are interested as a teacher in having a quick demo of it, the feedback so far that we've shown has been really strong. So please do get in touch if you would like to get a demonstration, and a member of the team can arrange that for you. So at this point then, I would love to dive into the Q&A. I know we've had some fantastic questions come through. So I'll invite Julian and Tanya, who joined us earlier, to turn their cameras and microphones on. And we've also got Ellie and Zara joining us as well. So if I could ask Ellie firstly to introduce herself, if she is online with us.
Hi, my name's Ellie. I'm currently studying at the Royal Vet College in London. I've just started my 3rd year, so we've had like 2 preclinical years, and then we've like just started integrating like clinical practice with our like continued academic study. And at the moment, in terms of like interest, I'd say currently I'm really keen on orthopedics, but I mean, in all honesty, like every week, every time we like focus on something new, every time I do a placement, I'm like, yeah, I want to do this. I think like the beauty of it is just like it's still so broad, even though like it sounds quite niche in that sense. But yeah, that's just a bit about me.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ellie, and lovely to hear that, you know, as the years goes on, the enthusiasm just grows. Perfect. And Zara, if you'd like to do the same.
Hi, so I'm Zara. I'm a 4th year dental student. I came straight from school, and I don't know how to top Eleanor's one. Yeah, I don't want to say I'm super interested in any one thing because I'm very undecisive about the specialties right now. But yeah, I interplated as well as a dental student. So if you have any questions on that, you can ask on that too. Yeah.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you so much. So I think a first question really that's come through is perhaps, I guess, aimed at Dr. Julian, based on your experience of interviewing. It would be great to hear what you think are kind of maybe the top obstacle or the common kind of, I guess, error that you encounter students making through your experience.
Yeah, so I think that it's really tempting when you're in a sort of high pressured environment like an interview to, you know, to rush through the answers, and you end up underselling yourself. And, you know, I think it's hard. It's a hard question. What is the most common mistake I see? I don't see a lot of mistakes, but I think the delivery is often something that can be improved. And, you know, we totally understand that students are really nervous, but I'm a great believer in, you know, practice. And I really encourage students to practice with their teachers, with their career advisors, their friends, their family, just to get as comfortable as possible at speaking about themselves and speaking about their experiences, and really just practicing having that structure of reflection. And once they get into the habit of that, you can really tell which students understand why we're asking the questions and which maybe don't so much and just sort of recite a list of experiences. So I would say that, you know, what really stands out is when students have a really nice structure and a really nice reflection. And it may seem really obvious, but actually it rarely happens in my experience. So I think practicing that is going to be really, really useful, and just avoiding making that sort of list.
Nice. Yeah, I think completely agree with that. And hopefully then, having seen the simulation tonight, the teacher can know, you know, how quickly those conversations can begin, and then how students can quickly learn that process so that it becomes second nature. Perfect. Okay, so then to Ellie and Zara and Tanya then, to ask, kind of stay on that theme of interviews, perhaps to Ellie first, what are your memories of your interview stages? And potentially to stay with the reflection theme, would you have done anything differently if you were to, you know, go back and do it again?
Stressful. But it was quite drawn out. Like every uni kind of has like different months that they do it in, so it was quite like a long process. And I think like I potentially learned more like after doing like the first one and then being like, oh, okay, like that's how it works. But I applied kind of all over, like to Edinburgh, Nottingham, RVC, and Cambridge, and they all had kind of different like methods. They had MMI, they had panel, but I think I was actually quite surprised as to how nice everyone was when I was there. Like, it was actually like a really enjoyable day. So I think, like, looking back, like, it's hard to say because obviously you're always going to be stressed, in hindsight, like, it's a beautiful thing, but I guess, like, just being more relaxed and more calm, because, like, the people opposite you, like, they're genuinely interested in what you do have to say, and if you can like kind of elicit that enthusiasm, and like I remember doing so much prep for it, and my teachers and the people that came in that we were lucky enough to speak to said that people are like just as concerned as like how you portray yourself and how you sound, and you know how enthusiastic you are about what you're talking about, it regardless of the subject matter. And I think for vet med, like especially in the current times because of COVID and stuff, it's been really hard to get placements. So it doesn't have to necessarily be like animal related placement. If you can be really passionate about something that you've been doing, like a part-time job, or like you're a carer or something like that for like a long period of time, like that just is enough to like show that you're like, you have the capability to kind of get there, because like everything can be taught when you're there. Like kind of just like are interested in you completely.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for those insights. I think probably really reassuring to know that, you know, when things have been cancelled, actually if you talk about the experience you have gained, it will still be as valued. Great. And then Zara, how was your interview experience, and anything maybe on reflection that you would have done differently maybe?
Yeah, there was something I almost should have done differently. So at one of my interviews, it was MMI, and there were lots of stations very bad at on-the-spot maths. And this MMI just had a lot of on-the-spot maths scattered throughout. So I would find myself doing really well in one station and go to the next. And I literally just got told in one of the stations towards the end, right before the buzzer went off, no, that's wrong. And we just sat in silence for like 2 seconds and the buzzer went off. And I remember I had like a minute before I went into the next station, and I could have gone 2 ways, I feel, and I feel like a lot of students do. I could have gone down the route of kind of thinking about it and thinking, what could the answer have been, dwelling on it, not moving on. But I chose to just be like, whatever, whatever. I gave it my best shot. I know that's my weak subject, but the next station probably isn't going to be maths, probably not twice in a row. And I just cleared my mind. But yeah, the interviews, as Ellie said, aren't as scary as they seem. But yeah, I think I would have told myself to kind of expect more of the unexpected, because I think as well, for dentistry, I went in assuming that the more prestigious schools would interview harder, which was the wrong mindset to go into. So for Queen's Belfast, it didn't rank as well in my year. It didn't kind of have the prestige that London did. And I remember going in being a bit blasé, thinking, you know what, I did the London ones, this one's going to be easier and this one's going to be similar. And I went in and I found it the most difficult and really, really hard. So I think that's also something where I kind of was thinking, well, but yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like you had a couple of challenging interviews. Obviously, were very impressive. And Tanya, how about your interview experience and any lessons on reflection?
So I actually applied twice. So I applied straight after sixth form, and then I took a gap year, and then I applied again. So I've done, in total medicine interviews, I've done 7 medicine interviews. So and I applied to also I applied to a range of places, including that had both panel and MMI interviews. I would say just to add on to sort of what the others have said, with interviews, I personally am one of those people, like even now you've asked me a question and I tend to like launch in and I'm like, oh, I want to say everything, you know, I have 5 minutes, come on, cram everything in. But actually it goes back to the point of sometimes just thinking, like stopping, replaying the question in your head and really thinking about what they're asking you, because like question 2 of our simulated interview, it had 2 parts, and if you weren't answering those 2 parts on the mark scheme, they would have 50% of the marks for the first part, so challenges of being a medical student, and then 50% of the marks would be for the other half of the question. So how would you overcome it? And say you launch in and you start talking about all the challenges of being a medical student, and then you really don't get round to talking about how you would overcome them, then you've lost 50% of the marks, even though you've been really, really passionate about whatever you did talk about. So I think it's the same for when you do an exam, right? So, again, just reading that question really carefully. Some people go away, underline the question, and then think about the key bits of it and then answer it. It's the same thing with interviews. So really reading that vignette. Most MMI interviews have a reading time. So you'll be given the vignette outside the station, and then you'll be given like 60 seconds or 90 seconds to think about it. And then you go in and you say your answer. So again, that reading time is so crucial, like how you use that. And again, this is maybe something that teachers could incorporate into their practice interviews, where they give them 60 seconds or 90 seconds to read and think, and really asking your students, how are you using that reading time? What's going through your head? Are you coming up with like some bullet points so that then you have a bit more of a structure instead of my old habit of launching into the answers? So I think that's something I would do differently. And I actually have an interview coming up next month. So that's advice I need to stay by.
Well, it sounds like you've had lots of experience there to apply, Tanya. So I'm sure you'll be absolutely fine. And Julian, I see, kind of based on your experience, we've had a question asking, how do admissions panels view references to personal experience, for example, illness in family, or that perhaps their own health issues when, referencing examples within the interview?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's something that students tend to ask me quite a lot. I would say that it's absolutely fine if you feel comfortable and want to do that, as long as it's done in the right way. And by that I mean that it is structured in a way that demonstrates your passion or your enthusiasm or something similar like that, that then you develop your answer into relating it to your future career and how you want to develop as a person and as a professional. So I think it's fine as long as it is structured in the right context. And you use it to your advantage, as to really sell yourself as a very motivated and passionate applicant. Perfect.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful to know how to kind of use it in that way. And another thing that is being asked quite a lot, and I know perhaps difficult to answer, but because it is kind of a holistic process, but a lot of teachers are wanted to know, and perhaps for you again, Julian, how important interviews might be in terms of the whole process in itself. With each, the work experience, the personal statement, the exams, are they each kind of equally weighted, or how is that kind of whole picture of the candidate painted throughout the process?
Yeah, it's not, to my knowledge, it's not standardized. And so universities put different weightings on different parts of the application. It's not something that I have actually personally got involved with, but my understanding is that some universities will put a lot more emphasis on personal statements than others, interviews than others, and also the admissions tests. So I think it's safe to say that the interview plays a key role and a large role in it. And so it's really important to put a lot of energy into preparing for it. But there's not a standard like 60% or anything.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. And I guess that feeds back into your point about, looking on the specific websites for each of the points. Yes, Ellie, did you have something to add to that?
Just quickly, I don't know if like medicine has this, but just in terms of like, the interview and the personal statement and stuff, I know for RVC in Bristol, you have to do, for vet med, you have to do like an additional questionnaire, and that's kind of like a really personalized like thing for their unis. Like, and I remember for RVC there were like 3 questions and you could answer with like 500 words, and it would be strange, really strange, like abstract questions, like if you were to find a person that completely complimented you, what would they be like? And that's it. And you just kind of like have to go with it. And so and all of this is kind of like available on their website. So I guess what I'm trying to say is just like really, really emphasize like going through each individual university's like requirement page and website, because they put these questionnaires in like literally as a tiny link at the bottom of the page. And I know a couple of my friends that are obviously not doing vet med, they're doing like biological sciences. Some of them actually missed the questionnaire, and all of these like tiny little things are just like little subsections of like ways that they can like separate everyone out, because they obviously get so many like applications. But I don't know if medicine has that, I'm not sure.
I've not heard of that, and that's really, really good to know. It's important to know that. And you've just prompted my memory, and I think also just that for some universities in interview, they will ask, and sometimes they have in front of them, the candidate's personal statement. Others will not have it at all. So I think it's really important just to remind students that, to look through what they wrote and just refresh their memory before the interview, just in case they suddenly pick something that you haven't thought about in a while, because it would have been a huge amount of time, months, that would have gone past between writing that statement and the interview as well.
Yeah, definitely worth reminding students of the books perhaps they reference and the podcast that they reference listening to and everything like that. So it's fresh in their memory. Okay, well, I'm not too sure where the time has gone, but I think we are slightly running over. So I might just pose a final question to everyone. And I'm sure it might seem quite difficult, but we would just like to ask, what would be your final piece of advice for a student who is about to embark on their preparation and then their interviews for medicine, dentistry, or vet med as well? Zara, I'm sorry to put you in the hot seat, but if I could come to you first to offer your kind of one piece of advice for a student about to go through this interview process.
I think for dentistry, it's to make sure that you really want to do dentistry and that you're specific to dentistry, because there are some applicants who aren't like very specific with their answers or with the application. It's very kind of general healthcare related, and it can almost read like a doctor's application. So yeah, I think that would be like my main tip, is to just be specific, but also not be too cliche with things. Like sometimes I've seen people's personal statements where their like introductory line is like, I had this like life-changing like smile makeover done, and like that made me want to become a dentist, which is like fair enough if it did, but you need to have like your good reasons as well, which is not just about like the superficial stuff, and understanding how the mouth can have like a holistic effect on the body and things like that. So yeah, for dentistry, yeah, it would be make sure that you know kind of specific knowledge and all that.
Right, yeah, definitely important to know their why and have those specific examples. Perfect. Ellie, next, your one final piece of advice.
Probably just like have a bank of personal anecdotes you can like whip out, because there could like some of the questions, and you will get continuity between like different universities. Like if you're in a sports team, or you've seen something on work experience or placement, and I would try and go for something unusual, not necessarily like it doesn't have to be like, oh, like this groundbreaking surgery you saw. If you see something quite unusual, and it could be something to do with like the client situation was unusual, or something like that you feel that like people might be interested in. Because I remember at one of my like MMIs, it was at the end of the day, and the question was just talk about work experience, and so I said something bit random, bit niche, and I remember the interviewer just saying like, thank you so much, I've listened to 200 people talk today about castrations and like dentals, and to like say something different. I mean, when I read my personal statement back, I read it back the other day, and I like just put in like some general funky words that I thought sounded smart. So I think, yeah, my main thing is just like really like emphasize on like having something personal to you to just make you stand out a bit, because there is always an element of luck to like these interview processes, like on the day, like because if you're, you know, pitched between two candidates that you're very similar, and if you say something like slightly different, you might be more memorable, and it's just like, you know, everyone's human. So I guess, yeah, just having some stories behind you.
Yeah, I like that. And I guess having those genuine reasons links back to what kind of Zara was saying about not just using the kind of generic cliche responses. Great. And Tanya, how about you?
I think just to add on to what Ellie said about the personal experiences and the personal anecdotes, then when you have that, like then thinking about all the skills that you can basically milk out of them is the way that I would like to describe it. So one experience can, you know, like can bring out teamwork, leadership, good communication, you name it. And any interview question that you have, you can basically tailor it around any one of your personal anecdotes or experiences. So just, I think from a teacher's point of view, what I think would be quite good advice to give to students, maybe telling them that it doesn't matter if you have hundreds of experiences or you have a couple of experiences, you can use them, you can utilize them by the power of reflection. That's what I would say. So just like thinking really long and hard about, you know, what did I do over this experience? What did this volunteering teach me? What did I observe over work experience? And these are just some examples. And thinking about what skills you observed or gained from each of those experiences. And again, writing them down and being really confident with speaking about them.
Great, thanks, Tanya. And finally, to Dr. Julian to give us one final piece of advice.
I think mine is be passionate and enthusiastic, but also realistic. So the thing I tend to say to students is that the people who you're being interviewed by may be your future colleagues, and show them why they would want to work with you. So if you have someone who's really enthusiastic, clearly passionate, that's quite infectious, as I've said, and also you know, insightful in the sense that they're, you know, acknowledging the fact that there are challenges, that it's a career of lifelong learning, as I said in my talk. Alongside that, just shows them, I think, to be quite well-rounded, and they've really thought through the career choice. But, you know, ultimately, when I interview someone, I think to myself, well, I want to work with this person. And so the way that they deliver their answers and the enthusiasm and the passion that they have really does come across, then that always goes in their favor.
Great. Well, thank you so much to all of our panelists for all of those great insights. I know it went very quickly, but there's been a lot of key pieces of advice there that I'm sure our teachers can go away with from today, share with their students, start to implement in the classroom, and really start to get them thinking about how they can prepare for the next couple of months, and, you know, have those specific examples. The power of reflection has come through a lot tonight, and that really seems to be something that if students can master now, it will really help them kind of get ahead in the future. So a big thank you to all of our professionals and students joining us tonight, as well as you at home for tuning in. Like I said at the start, I know it's a very busy time, and there's lots of things going on at the moment with schools. I'm sure everyone's looking forward to the half-term break. But one final just small ask from us is that we've just launched a feedback poll on Slido. Again, you can just use the QR code on screen now, or head to slido.com and enter the hashtag Medsky. And that will mean that you can just share with us your insights. We listen to the feedback, we then launch new events for teachers based on it. So it's really helpful for us to know what else we can be doing to support you as teachers. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I will just leave you now with a short clip showing some of the footage from our Young Doctor Summer experience over this past summer. And some of our students and some of our doctors talking about what it means to take part in that. But for now, we wish you all the best for all of the applications taking place in the next couple of months. And like I said, if you could just take a moment to complete the feedback, we'd really appreciate it. But thank you so much, everyone. We hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.
I've always wanted to do medicine, and when I read everything that was involved in the course, it sounded like a bit of everything.
I think one of the best ways to remember what you've been taught is to get your hands on. It's a chance for students not only to get involved and learn about what a career in medicine would entail, but also to just make contacts and speak to people who are actually involved.
It provides a really unique opportunity for them to develop their understanding of why this would be the career for them.
I found it insightful for what I want to do when I'm older.